The Amityville Horror, 1979, 20 Weird Facts You Didn't Know. It wasn't just a haunted house, it was a haunted production. There are films that attempt to scare you, and then there are films that carry something with them, something that seems to follow the cast and crew home long after the credits roll. The Amityville Horror was marketed as based on a true story, but what unfolded behind the scenes was stranger than anything captured on film. This was no ordinary haunted house movie. Based on the allegedly true events that befell the Lutz family in Amityville, New York, the 1979 adaptation quickly gained a reputation not just for its chilling scenes, but for what happened outside the frame. Lights went out unexpectedly, props refused to stay in place, and some crew members claimed the house or something in it followed them long after filming wrapped. But was it all marketing? A cleverly orchestrated myth to sell tickets? Or did the film's connection to a real-life murder case and a supposedly cursed location tap into something darker, something no studio press release would dare mention? Because here's the thing, the line between horror and reality was never clear on the Amityville Horror. And sometimes, the real story wasn't what happened on screen, it was what the cameras couldn't capture. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about the Amityville Horror, a film that may have told more truth than anyone was ready for. Fact A shown. The house was already watching before the cameras rolled. Before a single frame of film was shot, producers insisted on visiting the real house in Amityville, the site of the DeFeo murders and the supposed hauntings. They didn't go to seek permission, they went to absorb the atmosphere. Multiple crew members later confessed that they felt watched during the visit, even when the house was completely empty. Some swore that lights flickered as they stepped inside, even though the power had been disconnected. One production assistant refused to return, citing a pressure in the air that made it hard to breathe. He wasn't fired, he quit. That visit would define the tone of the entire shoot. Director Stuart Rosenberg, initially skeptical, became unusually quiet after that day. From that point on, key decisions like filming in a replica house instead of the real location were made with unspoken urgency. The house may not have made the film, but it made sure the film remembered it. Fact #2. James Brolin didn't believe in the haunting until the script moved on its own. When James Brolin was first offered the lead role of George Lutz, he thought the whole premise was laughable. A haunted house? Ghost pigs? Moving chairs? But he agreed to read the script overnight. As he reached a particularly intense moment where George wakes at 3:15 a.m. and hears voices, something bizarre happened. His pants, which had been neatly folded on a nearby chair, suddenly fell to the floor, with no one touching them. Brolin was so startled he dropped the script and refused to continue reading for the night. The next morning, he called the producers back not to decline the role, but to accept it. That unexplained moment, he later said, hooked me harder than the script did. What terrified him wasn't what was written on the page, it was what seemed to be reading it with him. Fact #3. The real Lutz family warned the studio and then vanished. Before production began, the real George and Kathy Lutz agreed to consult with the filmmakers. They shared tapes, photographs, and diary entries that allegedly proved their ordeal was real. But something shifted during pre-production. According to one associate producer, the Lutzes suddenly pulled away, stopped answering calls, and even canceled a scheduled press conference. No explanation was given. Rumors swirled that they had been threatened by whom no one could confirm. Others whispered that the family regretted selling the rights and feared the film would invite more than just critics. To this day, no one from the original cast or crew can agree on why the Lutzes walked away so abruptly. They gave Hollywood a story and then disappeared from its spotlight as quickly as they had entered. Fact #4. The set replicas were perfect too perfect. Because the real house at 112 Ocean Avenue was off limits for filming, the crew built a near-identical facade on a soundstage in Toms River, New Jersey. The staircase, windows, and even the basement were recreated down to the inch based on photographs, floor plans, and testimonies from the Lutzes themselves. But something was off. Within days, crew members reported hearing footsteps on the replica's upper floors, even when the set was officially closed for the night. Others claimed to hear a child laughing in the bathroom, though no children were allowed on set during those sequences. A security guard quit after reporting a figure standing at a second-floor window long after wrap. When they checked the footage from that night, the camera had inexplicably jammed for exactly 3 minutes and 15 seconds. They had recreated the house with eerie precision, and something, apparently, had moved in. Fact #5. Margot Kidder laughed at the ghost rumors until the window opened by itself. On her third day of filming, Margot Kidder had to shoot a scene in the upstairs bedroom. The crew prepped everything, sealed the windows, and made sure no external wind could interfere with lighting. But just before cameras rolled, one of the windows suddenly flew open with a bang. Everyone froze. The hinges were intact, the lock still clicked in place, and there were no drafts. It happened twice more that day. After the third time, Kidder reportedly whispered, "Okay, fine, I believe you now." From that moment on, she insisted on having her dressing room blessed and refused to be on set after 9 p.m. Some dismissed it as nerves. Others remembered the chill in the air every time that window was mentioned. Whatever it was, it didn't want her to feel at home in that house. Fact #6. The basement scene that no one wanted to shoot. One of the most disturbing scenes in the Amityville Horror takes place in the basement, where a hidden room painted red is discovered behind a wall. The script called for a short sequence, but the shoot dragged on for nearly a week. Cameras kept malfunctioning, lights burst, and actors complained of feeling nauseous while inside. One grip had to be hospitalized after fainting during setup. A priest brought in at the request of the lighting crew refused to step into the red room entirely, saying something about an absence, not a presence. The studio tried to downplay it, but the incident caused a 2-day delay in the already tight schedule. No one ever spoke of the basement again. But the red paint was never fully cleaned off the walls, no matter how many coats they added. Fact #7. Camera operators refused to film the church scene twice. One of the pivotal scenes involves the character Father Delaney entering a church, only to be violently rejected by a supernatural force. The scene was complex to shoot, requiring practical effects, wind machines, and delicate lighting setups. But it wasn't the logistics that caused problems. It was the people. 2 different camera operators quit within 48 hours, both refusing to reshoot the same moment. One claimed that his camera kept jamming precisely as the priest's dialogue turned to Latin. Another walked off set saying he heard whispering through the headphones despite no one else being mic'd. Director Stuart Rosenberg reportedly banned further retakes and told the crew, "We got what we need, let's move on." Some say it was a creative decision. Others say he just didn't want to challenge the scene again. After all, how many times can you push something invisible before it pushes back? Fact #8. James Brolin's mood changed after the fly scene and didn't change back. One of the most memorable visual motifs in the film is the swarm of flies that haunt the priest in the upstairs room. For that sequence, hundreds of live flies were imported and handled by an insect specialist. But it wasn't the priest actor who had the worst experience. It was James Brolin. While rehearsing a separate scene in the same room, Brolin noticed a single fly land on his cheek and stay completely still for over a minute, then another, then a third. Within seconds, his face was covered. The room hadn't been prepped for a fly shot, and no one could explain where they had come from. After that day, crew members said Brolin's demeanor changed. He became more withdrawn, less talkative. He would sit silently between takes, staring at the walls as if waiting for something. When asked later, he only said, "I don't remember much from that week, and I'm not sure I want to." Fact #9. The bleeding walls were too real for some crew members. The film famously features a moment where red liquid seeps from the walls, a practical effect designed using dyed corn syrup and heating coils. The problem? It worked too well. Several crew members grew nauseous at the smell, despite it being a food-safe mixture. Others claimed it didn't behave like syrup at all. It moved slowly, unpredictably, pooling in corners where no tubing had been installed. One effects technician reportedly had a nosebleed during the take, his first ever on set. But what disturbed the director most was that the liquid stained the drywall permanently. Even after reshoots and cleaning, faint red streaks remained, as if the house refused to let go of the moment. They had engineered a haunting, and it had started acting on its own. Fact #0. The crew heard screaming during the staircase scene, but the set was empty. One of the film's most iconic moments shows George Lutz slowly descending the stairs at night, axe in hand, consumed by rage. It's a turning point in the character's descent and also in the production's atmosphere. On the day of filming, just as Brolin prepared for his take, a high-pitched scream echoed across the set. Sound technicians froze. They assumed it came from one of the upstairs monitors, but playback had not yet begun. The scream was recorded, but when the audio file was reviewed, nothing appeared in the waveform. Brolin went on with the scene, visibly shaken. Some say it improved his performance, others say it wasn't acting. To this day, no one has explained where the scream came from or why it stopped as suddenly as it began. Fact #9. A real axe went missing and was found in the wrong scene. The prop department kept tight control over all weapons used on set, especially the axe wielded by Brolin's character. It was kept locked, tracked, and signed out with military precision. But during the filming of an unrelated kitchen scene, a crew member opened a drawer and found the real axe tucked between two prop knives. No one could explain how it got there. It hadn't been scheduled for use that day. The drawers hadn't been opened since set dressing wrap the week before. Production halted for several hours as safety protocols were reviewed. Brolin refused to rehearse with any real props afterward. The scene was eventually completed, but the atmosphere never fully recovered. A weapon meant for one scene had moved itself into another, uninvited and unexplained. Fact Hasson 2, Margot Kidder had a breakdown off camera, and no one wrote it into the script. During one of the final interior scenes, Margot Kidder was required to scream and collapse on the floor, an emotionally taxing sequence that had already taken its toll after multiple takes. But on the fourth take, something snapped. She broke down for real, not in character, not scripted. She sobbed uncontrollably, backed into a corner, and reportedly whispered, "It's here." The crew called for a medic. Shooting was paused. Kidder returned later that evening, quiet and composed, but she never discussed what happened. The footage of that take was never used. Some say it was destroyed, others say it's locked in a vault, too raw and too real to ever be seen. It was the one scene that didn't need special effects. The horror, for once, wasn't acting. Fact Hasson 3. The final scene was shot, but no one could find the film. The original final scene of the Amityville Horror was filmed over 2 days and involved a frantic escape from the basement, followed by a slow, haunting exterior pullback of the house at dawn. But when editors began assembling the cut, the canisters were missing. The footage over 2,000 feet of film had vanished from the vault. A formal investigation was launched, but there were no signs of theft. No entry logs, no missing inventory. The film simply wasn't there. They were forced to reshoot the ending using a tighter interior sequence and voiceover. The original version, said to be more abstract and psychologically disturbing, has never surfaced. Some blame a clerical error. Others believe the film didn't want its ending revealed. Fact Hasson 4. Test screenings were a disaster until the sound was removed. The first test screening of the film took place in Los Angeles in late 1978. According to internal studio memos, it was a catastrophe. Viewers reportedly screamed during inappropriate moments. Others laughed during scenes of high tension. But one note stood out: something is wrong with the audio. It's not syncing with the image, or it's not from the image. In desperation, the studio screened the same cut the next day, but without sound. The reaction was completely different. The audience sat in silence. A few left early. One woman fainted. No explanation was ever given for the sound discrepancies. The final mix was redone from scratch, using only certain takes approved by the sound engineer, who later quit without giving notice. It wasn't the sound that disturbed people, it was what they thought they heard behind it. Fact Hasson 5. The studio destroyed the set and denied it ever happened. After the film wrapped and post-production ended, the studio arranged to have the replica house dismantled and placed in storage, but just weeks later, it was gone, bulldozed. No public explanation, no photos, no press release. When asked, a spokesperson from American International Pictures claimed the set was never built to last, but archived permits showed that the structure had been cleared to stand for 5 years. Several crew members, when contacted years later, said they were never told why it was destroyed so suddenly. Some believe it was insurance-related. Others whisper it was about energy, something left behind on the set that they didn't want lingering. The house was gone. The story was sealed. But the silence around its disappearance spoke louder than any ghost ever could. Fact Hasson. Projectionists started quitting during the first week of release. Within days of the film's theatrical release, cinema managers across the U.S. began reporting a strange pattern. Projectionists were walking out mid-shift, specifically during screenings of The Amityville Horror. One manager in Chicago noted that 3 separate employees refused to finish the third act of the film, claiming they heard whispering inside the projection booth when they were alone. In Boston, a fire alarm was triggered in a theater showing the film, despite no smoke or heat being detected. The fire department found nothing except a projector that had inexplicably melted part of its own reel casing. None of these incidents made headlines, but internally, theaters started taking precautions, always assigning 2 people to late-night screenings, or in some cases, moving the film to earlier time slots. It wasn't the audience that was disturbed. It was the people running the show. Fact Hasson 7. James Brolin's dog refused to enter his screening room. Weeks after the film premiered, James Brolin hosted a private screening at his home for friends and family. As he prepared the room, his German Shepherd, normally calm and obedient, began barking at the television, even though it was turned off. When Brolin tried to coax the dog into the room, it froze at the threshold, growled, and refused to step inside. Later, during the actual screening, the dog paced outside the door the entire time, whining and scratching at the walls. Brolin reportedly turned the film off before it ended. He never attempted another home screening again. Some wrote it off as coincidence. Others remembered that animals, more than humans, are said to sense what shouldn't be there, and maybe the film had more than just sound and images encoded in its frames. Fact has on 8. A reporter died the day after interviewing the real Lutzes. In an eerie epilogue to the film's release, a New York-based journalist who had interviewed George and Kathy Lutz for a post-release piece was found dead in his apartment the following morning. Official cause: heart failure. He was 33. The interview tape was recovered, but half of it had been mysteriously erased. The journalist's final notes, scribbled in the margins of a notebook, read only, "Don't write it, let it go." The studio never commented, the article was never published, and the Lutzes, who had remained silent throughout the film's release, never gave another interview again. For a film marketed on being based on a true story, perhaps the real story was one no one wanted to finish. Fact Hassananine. The real house changed hands, but the new owners hid something. After the film's release, the actual house at 112 Ocean Avenue was sold to new residents who firmly denied any supernatural events. They gave interviews, hosted reporters, and opened their doors to skeptics. But one thing always stood out: they refused to let anyone into the basement. Despite repeated requests by media outlets and documentary crews, access to the basement was always under renovation or off limits for insurance reasons. Neighbors said the owners rarely went down there themselves and kept the lights on in that part of the house 24/7. Some believe it was an attempt to end the haunting narrative. Others say whatever had started there had never fully stopped. The house may have changed owners, but not everything inside was willing to leave. Fact #20. A frame-by-frame analysis revealed a face no one recognized. In 2005, a group of horror archivists digitally restored the Amityville Horror 1979 for an anniversary screening. While analyzing a high-resolution frame of a hallway scene, one that had always seemed unremarkable, they discovered something chilling: a face, faintly visible in the shadows, reflected in a mirror that was supposed to be covered. It didn't belong to any actor, crew member, or extra. It wasn't part of the lighting equipment. No one could explain it. Attempts to recreate the lighting scenario failed. The angle of the reflection didn't match anything physically possible on set. The restored version included a disclaimer: unexplained visual anomaly, authentic to the original print. Whatever it was, it had always been there. We just hadn't looked closely enough. Bonus fact: the script was allegedly rewritten by a dream. In a 1980 interview that was later pulled from syndication, one of the uncredited script doctors on the Amityville Horror made a bizarre confession: that key portions of the screenplay, including the timing of supernatural events, were inspired by a recurring dream he had for 7 nights straight. In the dream, he stood in the basement of a house he didn't recognize, while a child whispered numbers to him from the dark. The numbers turned out to correspond to timestamps in the script: 3:15 a.m., the cold spots, the flies, the moment the crucifix falls. He used them to restructure the entire flow of tension in the narrative. He later tried to find the house from his dreams. When he saw a photo of the real Amityville house, he claimed, "That's it, that's where I was." No one else involved in the production confirmed his account. The interview was pulled. The tape is missing, but some who've watched the film closely say the pacing feels off, as if someone or something outside the story dictated its rhythm. And if the house had a voice, maybe it didn't speak through walls or screams. Maybe it wrote the movie. Tell us in the comments, which fact left a mark and which one do you think was never meant to be found? And if there's another film whose shadows deserve a closer look, let us know. We'll be watching.